So I'm just going to welcome everyone that's being let in from the waiting room. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. We're still letting people in from the waiting room. Thank you so much for joining, and we will get started in about one more minute. I think we're still letting people in, but we are definitely going to get started. We're going to get started shortly. So again, thank you everybody for joining. Give people another second or two to just settle in, maybe get some coffee, prepare for the rest of the evening. All right, so we're right at 7:03 right now. Um, I will get started first by just saying thank you to everyone that's here right now. If you see me bouncing back and forth, that's just because I do have my handy dandy notes over here. Um, so I'll get started by briefly just telling you why we're here tonight, who I am, and what we're here to do. So welcome to the Racial Justice School Committee Candidate Forum. This forum is hosted by two racial justice groups in Melrose, Fighting for Black Lives in Our Neighborhood and the Friends of Melrose METCO slash Melrose Racial Justice Community Coalition. My name is Ayana Spencer Lakes, and I'm happy to be here. I feel like I'm a professional moderator now since I got to do it once last year. Um, I'm gonna have to update my bio now to say an honorary Melrosian, because I feel so connected to this town because my son spends a lot of time there and he was a part of the MECO program, elementary up through the 6th grade. Um, I'd like to ask everybody if there are additional questions that come to mind, please reach out to the candidates before November 4th to get those questions asked and answered. The speaker order for tonight was randomly selected, and we will rotate the speaking order. A recording of this event will be posted at www.melroseracialjusticeforums.org. So now we'll get started and we'll go into our questions. So question 1, personal reasons for service. The order of this question will start with Jen. I've heard you like to go by Jen.
Yes, please.
Sherry, and then we'll have Melissa. So I'll read the question for everybody and then feel free to come in and answer. Why are you choosing to step into this work now, and what drives you personally to want to serve?
My name is Jennifer Rozzi Thomas. Thank you so much, Ayana, for introducing us. And I am in my 8th year of service on the Melrose School Committee. I'm a clinical social worker with over 30 years of experience working with youth and families. For the last 15 years, I've worked in Salem, Massachusetts at a small competency-based high school, which is part of Salem Public Schools. At this high school, we serve a majority of kids of color, most of whom are newcomers to Massachusetts. Many families were from the Dominican Republic and from Puerto Rico. One of the reasons why I originally ran for office was in reaction to the first Trump presidency. I was horrified by the racist tropes that Trump used and how he constantly attacked immigrants, especially folks from Central and South America. I was equally horrified at how he objectified women and demonized the trans community. In good conscience, given that we are now in the second Trump presidency, I can't stop serving now. I feel compelled to keep standing up for people of color, newcomers, and trans folks. And I promise, if reelected, to continue to watch out for any group that may be targeted, misunderstood, or attempted to be oppressed in Melrose. I will speak up, and I will hold all educators within the Melrose Public Schools to the highest standards of maintaining a positive, welcoming, well-informed, and culturally humble community.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful response. Um, and we're going to go to our next candidate, Sherry.
Thanks, Ayana. My name is Sherry Leo, and I'm excited for the opportunity to introduce myself. I'm a parent and a homeowner, a former teacher and current nonprofit professional, a school volunteer, and community board member. I have more than 2 decades of experience as a talent leader, and I've dedicated my professional life to improving public education. Over 14 years in Melrose, I've served as a soccer coach, school volunteer, site council member, and board member of the Bridge and Follow Your Art. My multi-generational household includes my parents, husband, and children, 7th and 9th graders in Melrose Public Schools. I began my career as a public school teacher in Washington, D.C., served in the strategy office of Chicago Public Schools, and advised states on education policy. I'm now VP of Talent, Learning, and Culture at a nonprofit that helps educators make change in their communities. I hold degrees from Brown University, American University, and the University of Chicago. These experiences, personal and professional, help prepare me to serve our city at this critical time for our public schools. If I'm elected, I will work every day to invest in our schools, build a culture of trust, and support every student. I'd like to share a bit about what that means. When I say invest in our schools, I mean support the override. But whether or not it passes, I will make budget decisions that are strategic, reflect our values, and meet student needs. I will include stakeholder voices in setting direction for our schools, and I will continue to advocate for funding for Melrose students. When I say build a culture of trust, I mean I will work to hire and keep a superintendent who is right for Melrose and committed to building for the long term. I will invest in talent at all levels to keep great teachers and stabilize our schools. And I will uplift the amazing teaching and learning that happens every day in Melrose Public Schools. And finally, when I say support every student, I mean that I will work to make every student feel welcome, valued, and safe, especially the most vulnerable. I will prioritize fully staffing special education services to meet the needs of every student. And I recognize that student needs evolve, and I will work to understand and address these changing needs. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for organizing this forum to uplift issues of vital importance to our community.
Again, very thoughtful responses. And our next candidate, Melissa, her responses were pre-recorded, so we get to just press play and hear her response.
Hi, all. Thank you for hosting this forum and allowing me the chance to pre-record my responses so that I can still participate in these important conversations. My husband and I moved to Melrose in 2016, and we're proud parents of twins who are in the 3rd grade at Roosevelt. Over the years, I have volunteered through the PTO as room representative code coordinator during library class visits and other various school events. These experiences have given me a deep appreciation for the dedication of our educators and administrators, the resilience of our students, and the passion of our families. I decided to run for school committee because we're at a pivotal moment in Melrose with ongoing budget challenges and leadership transitions, including 4 superintendents in the past 4 years. We need steady, collaborative people at the table. I see this as an opportunity to help strengthen our schools by investing in educators, supporting in students' mental health, and ensuring every child, regardless of background, feels seen, supported, and inspired to learn. My background in social work, student services, and event management provides me with the tools and skills to actively listen, build relationships, and advocate effectively. I cannot claim to have all the answers, including on the topic of racial justice, but I am committed to learning, engaging, and working toward a more inclusive and supportive and successful school community for all.
Great. Now we're going to go into question 2 under the header support for students and their families. Our first candidate to answer this question will be Sherry Leo. How will you support our Black and Brown students? What strategies do you have for building meaningful relationships with Black and Brown families, including Metco families? Two-parter. How should families trust you to make decisions that deeply impact our children? And how will you keep humanity at the center of those decisions?
Okay, this is a big one. These are excellent questions, and there are a lot, so I'll do my best. So first, I'll try to address them in order. How will I support Black and Brown students? So I want to ground us in the school committee's 3 duties. 1, to determine the district budget using allocations from the city. 2, to hire and evaluate the superintendent. And 3, to set policy for Melrose Public Schools. In all 3 of these areas, there are opportunities and responsibilities to support Black and Brown students. If I'm elected, I can ensure that we budget funds to address needs and attract strong, diverse talent to the district. I can assess superintendent candidates for their cultural competence and experience supporting every student across diverse populations. And I can review policies for disparate impacts to Black and Brown students and propose changes to those policies to create a more welcoming environment where every student can achieve their potential. Okay, to the second question, how will I build meaningful relationships with Black and Brown families, including Metco families? I'm committed to supporting every student, especially those who are most vulnerable. And supporting students' needs means first listening to understand. Per Metco, Melrose welcomes 109 students from the Metco program into our school community. That is a small enough number that members of the school committee can absolutely reach out to every single Metco family, and I'm committed to doing so. Building relationships starts with vulnerability and an honest effort to engage. I don't know everything, and there are many perspectives I can only learn from others. I will seek out these perspectives from Black and Brown students and their families. I will build trust by being clear about what is in scope and outside of it for school committee, and when I commit to an action, I'll report back on what I've done. So to your third question, how should families trust me to make decisions? I think trust must be earned. I think it's hard to build and easy to lose. I like to think that I've earned trust in my professional career from leaders, from educators, and from the communities we serve. It takes transparency, honest communication, and demonstrating over and over a commitment to the mission and the work. And then finally, you asked, how will I keep humanity at the center of those decisions? Every family wants their child to succeed, and every student does well when they can. These core beliefs guide all my work with schools and ensure I remain grounded in the real people who are impacted by every decision I make. Families need to know me and be able to reach me. I've spent this campaign introducing myself to community members and establishing channels of communication. I'll continue to make myself available and want to hear from students, families, and other stakeholders. If you're watching this at home or later on the recording, you can email me at sherryformelrose@gmail.com or call or text at 781-281-8123. Tell me where Melrose Public Schools can do better and what's going well.
Great. Thank you so much, Jen, for putting your information out there. I really appreciate it. And we are going to have Melissa's video come in now so she can answer that question.
In regards to supporting our Black and Brown students, I would like to say that any incident where a student feels unsafe, unsupported, or unwelcome because of who they are is unacceptable. We need those situations to be treated seriously. My goal is to ensure that Melrose is creating school environments where every student feels accepted, valued, and supported. Unfortunately, we know that incidents of racial discrimination, bullying, and other forms of harassment occur. When these incidents happen, our responses must be clear, consistent, and effective. Teachers and administrators need to be equipped with the tools and strategies to address these incidents, and this requires ongoing training and professional development. We can build a culture of inclusion and belonging to be proactive and not just reactive. Ways to do this include updating and evaluating our curriculum to reflect diverse histories and perspectives, celebrating cultural events from all communities, and creating space for school assemblies and classroom discussions that promote empathy and inclusion and are built upon year after year. For example, last year, Roosevelt welcomed We the People as a learning series for our youngest students and the ABCs of Racism for parents and caregivers. By offering both of these learning opportunities, we can spark meaningful conversations for our students, both at home and at school. But we do need to ensure these programs are followed up throughout the years and offered to all students, not just one school in particular. For building meaningful relationships with Black and Brown families and METCO families, personally, as a community member, I believe that relationships begin with genuine connection. I introduce myself, I listen, and I follow through. This is how I've built my relationships and trust during my career and working with students and in my volunteer roles. It's also how I'll approach my relationships with Black and Brown families living here in Melrose and those in the METCO program, as well as other groups like multi-language learners and students with special needs. I recognize that my experience as a white woman will be different than the experiences of our parents and students of color. I'm committed to stepping outside of my own perspectives and so that I can understand other perspectives. My background in social work and student services, where those students come from different cultures and backgrounds, has taught me how to navigate complex situations and make decisions that reflect a range of voices. I will remain committed to being present, accessible, and engaged with our Melrose community. And for families trusting me, I believe that trust is built through honesty, empathy, and consistency. Leading with humanity means listening to the experience of others, asking thoughtful questions, and being transparent about what I know and what I'm still learning. I won't always have the perfect answer, but I will be honest about what information I have and how decisions are being made. I will follow through when I don't have an answer, or I will direct you to the correct person to speak with. I want to ensure that families have access to resources and next steps, even when solutions aren't immediate. I'm willing to approach situations with humility and care and will take time to reflect on my own biases. Racial justice work is ongoing, and I'm committed to learning and growing alongside the community. I believe in the simple and powerful principle that we treat others the way we want to be treated. When we lead with empathy and respect, we can create an environment that allows everyone to feel that they belong and are being heard.
And next up, we will hear from Jen.
Thank you so much. So one of the few things that we've done over the last 8 years on the school committee is we've approved some changes in policy that hopefully will have a deep and positive impact on students who are Black and brown. One of the things that we've done is unlevel the classes in the 9th grade in the high school. And the hope for that is that we have to acknowledge every single day, if we're doing anti-racist work, that racism is baked into our culture and into our history. So if racism has been baked into our culture and into our history, then we have to be constantly looking at our systems to see what barriers are there for kids who may be treated differently. And that may not be intentionally by educators, but we all have biases because of the cultures that we've been raised in. So one of the things that we did was unlevel the classes in the 9th grade. And that was to basically say, like, anyone coming to our high school is not going to be tracked. They're going to be given every opportunity that they can to succeed. So they can get into AP classes, they can get into the regular, any class in high school is going to kind of start out at the same way, with the exception of math. If you've had accelerated math in the middle school, then you can access that in 9th grade. So I think that's just one example of how policy and decisions can hopefully make a positive impact. We don't want to track students because we don't want to have low expectations for certain students. We want to have high expectations for all students. And unfortunately, I think sometimes Black and brown students are treated as if they can't, when they can, just like anyone else. So we also need to use good pedagogy, like culturally responsive teaching in the brain, which is written by Zaretta Hammond, which I know the district uses here in Melrose, and my district in Salem uses as well. And that basically helps teachers to become better and educators better at teaching all different types of kids. It doesn't matter what culture you come from, you can reach any student if you use good methods, and if you have a culturally responsive classroom. And that means meeting students where they're at, being curious about their culture, and being very humble to seek to understand where they're coming from, and then to embrace where they've come from and celebrate all different cultures in the classroom. So building meaningful relationships with families, including MECO families. I think showing up is the most important thing. So whenever we have a joined activity, whether it's in Boston or whether it's in Melrose, we should do our best to get there, to be there, to just talk with people, to say that, you're a human being, being a human being with other human beings. You're not a school committee member up here away from people, you're with people. And that's also, my knowledge as a social worker. You sit with people, you get to know them, they get to know you, and that's how you build trust. One last thing is, every school committee meeting opens with us saying the Pledge of Allegiance, which always felt to me for the first few years like, am I back in elementary school again? And then I just really thought of the last line, which is with liberty and justice for all. And that's what we should be doing every single time we're sitting in that horseshoe at school committee meetings, thinking about every single student, every single family, and what do we need to lift everyone up. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all of those answers, and Jen, leaving that on a high note with the liberty and justice. So we're gonna go into our third question, accountability. And up first we have Melissa, we'll transition to Jen, and then lastly we'll have Sherry. If you are elected to the school committee, what actions will you take to hold Melrose Public Schools accountable for incidents and patterns of systematic racism?
Systemic racism is an ongoing challenge that requires consistent attention, reflection, and action. We know that Black and brown students in Melrose have experienced harm and exclusion, and we must be committed to doing better. If elected to the school committee, I will, one, ensure equity is a priority in our leadership hiring. When we're selecting a superintendent, we can ask direct questions about their experiences and trainings around anti-racism work. We can ask about their goals to working toward removing systemic racism and how they have planned to accomplish this within the district. We can review our policies and our handbooks through an equity lens. This includes, but is not limited to, our disciplinary procedures. We want to ensure that our policies are fair and do not disproportionately impact any marginalized students. Three, I support restorative justice practices, which are currently listed as one of the discipline practices in our student handbooks. We need to continue to evaluate that these procedures are being implemented consistently and effectively. We can advocate for and support programs like We the People, as I mentioned, in our schools to begin racial literacy in elementary school and build upon these learning opportunities through things like racial studies classes and or student groups that focus on racial discussions. And we can offer staff training and coaching to provide ongoing support for teachers to be able to handle situations with compassion and care. This includes anti-bias training, cultural competency, and trauma-informed practices. And we can advocate for and support teachers who are providing curriculum that is inclusive and holistic. I do want to be clear that I understand that some of these points will cost money and that we don't currently have that this is not currently available in our budget. Our budget constraints are real, but we can consider ways in which we can still act with low cost initiatives, and then we can build towards our larger goals as funding becomes available, because we need to be in a school system that invests in these practices for all of our students. I'm committed to keeping these conversations active and centered on the well-being of our students.
And up next, Jen.
Thank you. So one of the things that's tricky about being on a school committee is you don't always see what we do behind the scenes because we cannot be part of personnel decisions. That's not within our purview. The only person that we hire and evaluate is the superintendent, and we can approve new positions. We do that based on job descriptions, but we are not responsible for day-to-day operations within schools. That being said, that doesn't mean that we don't put pressure on the system, and we always hold the superintendent to a very high standard. So I think, the superintendent is accountable for the staffing, and I think so. But we can know that if there's patterns of systemic racism regarding discipline, there's lots of things we can do about that in terms of policy, and we can do a lot through hiring good people. I know we're going to get to representation among teaching staff in the next question, but I just think it's really important for us to remember what the role of the school committee is. It's also important for us to be outspoken about diversity, equity, and inclusion, about being anti-racist, and to continue to say those words right now when they're under assault by our federal government. So I think being really confident about that, also not allowing, people to silence us who want to silence us. So we've seen some actions in other cities and towns around us. Peabody, for instance, recently they tried to get rid of All American Boys as a piece of literature, and the public school union spoke up against that, and there was a pretty heated school committee meeting about that. So if that is about to happen here in Melrose, which I don't think it will, we're ready for it because we instituted a new policy last year, or earlier this year, around what to do when we have complaints about what people may consider inappropriate books or curriculum. So we're ready to say, no, we're going to protect free speech, and we're not going to erase any history. And you have that pledge from me right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Sherry?
Okay. I'm excited to also dig into some of the policies that we're going to talk about in the next questions, but I'll try to keep it brief and focus just on this accountability question here right now. And I want to start off by naming that topics of racism and bias are complex and emotionally charged. And so I have seen throughout my career, it's tempting to sidestep the conversations. I also believe deeply that it's critically important that if we are to live into our motto of Melrose, one community open to all, then we cannot shy away from what is uncomfortable or inconvenient. It's also worth noting that systemic racism is about just that, systems and institutions. Systemic racism transcends generations and the boundaries of our city, which isn't to say the problem is too hard or too complicated or out of our hands. We can and must address bias in policies and systems that we manage and we own. As a school committee member, I pledge to listen deeply, remain alert to patterns of bias and disparate outcomes, and lift up what I find. Accountability isn't a one-time action, but an ongoing conversation about intentions, impact, data, and experiences. When we identify harm, we need to step up, acknowledge it, apologize, and work for change. That's what accountability looks like in this and all areas of school committee leadership, and I'm excited to engage with other school committee members in this area.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer those questions. Question 4, representation among teaching staff. First, we'll start with Jen, Sherry, and then Melissa. State data indicate that Melrose has no Black teachers. This is a loss for all of our students. However, it is especially concerning for the 6% of our student body that is Black, because studies show that when Black students have Black teachers, they are less likely to miss school and be suspended and more likely to thrive academically and aspire to college. At past forums, candidates have suggested a range of solutions, including creating pipelines from paraprofessional to teacher roles, partnering with universities, improving recruitment, outreach, and addressing Melrose below average teacher pay. However, these ideas have not yet translated into specific time-bound commitments from city leaders. What percentage goal of Black teachers would you set for the city to achieve in the next 3 years? What accountability measures do you support if the goal is not met? And Jen, you're up.
Thank you. This is a tough one, and not because we don't want to make this change. It's tough because there's also, you have to change the stream, right? So if we're going to have more Black teachers, which we would love to have, we have to have some, and then they have a positive experience in Melrose, and then they help us bring more in, because it's an issue of safety. Becomes an issue of safety for people, where they want to work and where they feel safe and where they feel comfortable and where they have peers. And so it's absolutely a fact that representation for your identity matters, and it's so important to have a diverse workforce. And I would love to set a goal of having at least 6% Black teachers across the district within the next 4 years. That would be fantastic. It starts with one. You know, while Christopher Beaver is a vice principal at the high school, he's there. I think that makes a difference. I think, you know, he's from Salem. We've worked with some of the same kids when he was in Salem. I discovered that when he started working here in Melrose. And, you know, maybe he'll be able to pull a couple of people from the Salem Academy where he used to work. I was thrilled that Doreen Ward was returning to our district. She, I think, clearly must trust Carrie Berman, our interim superintendent, or she wouldn't have come back into that larger role that she's in now. So I think if you have really good people who know really good people and they can recruit, that's the most important thing. And we've really worked on this at this very small high school that I work at to make sure, so we have, you know, majority of brown and Black kids. So we have to have a diverse staff. But the problem is also that there's just not enough Black educators, right? There's not that many Black teachers. So where are they going to work? They're probably going to work where it's a majority Black kids. But it's just tough. So I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm not saying that we can't do it, but it's challenging, and it starts with 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then you get to 10, right? So we have to make sure that we're a welcoming environment. We have to pass this override so people feel like they have a stable place to work? Because who's going to come here if we don't pass this override, right? Because it's a risk as a Black person to come work in a majority white community anyway. And if you're the last one to come in, you're the first one to go. So I think we have to do a lot of work around stabilizing our educational system, having excellent leaders who we actually have, who really care about this issue, who can recruit and hire excellent educators, some of whom will be people of color.
Thank you. And Sherry?
In my career, I've led talent at multiple organizations where we increase the percentage of staff of color. In my current nonprofit, where I lead hiring, 70% of staff identify as people of color, up from about 50% when I joined 7 years ago. That now includes 1/3 of staff who identify as Black. I'm very proud of the progress that we've made. I led similar efforts at a school turnaround organization, doubling the number of teachers of color in some schools. The research is clear and compelling, as you stated in the question, that teacher diversity has a positive impact for all students and especially Black students. It is good for student achievement, belonging, and future civic engagement. In the 6 years I worked with school leaders on this issue, every single one recognized the value and importance of diversifying the teaching workforce. In my experience, it's not a lack of will that's holding Melrose back. In your report, you accurately named some of the barriers to diversifying the teaching workforce in Melrose, including homogeneous teacher pipelines in Massachusetts, salaries that are lower than all neighboring districts, and the difficulty of attracting teachers of color to a district where they lack representation and a support system. But even against these headwinds, there are steps we can take. In my experience, the best way to attract Black educators is to be an attractive place to work. Believe in your mission, build a culture and relationships that ensure all staff can grow and thrive, and create inclusive policies that meet all staff members' needs so they feel seen, valued, and supported as humans. At the same time, we can proactively recruit teachers from other districts and regions of the country. I've done it. Melrose is an amazing place to live, and Massachusetts is a terrific state in which to grow your teaching career. There are many amazing teachers of color out there. We simply need to find them. But it's important to remember that Melrose is competing with every other district working to attract strong, diverse talent, and almost all of them have more resources. It's just one more way that the city's budget crisis makes our racial disparities worse, and one more way that the override can move our city forward.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And then we'll play the video for our next question.
I strongly believe that a diverse teaching and administrative staff, benefits all students and is critical for all of our students of color and multi-language learner and everyone in the district. Representation matters among marginalized groups. When students see themselves reflected in paraprofessionals and their educators and in the administration, it fosters belonging. That said, I don't feel I can commit to a specific percentage goal without a deeper analysis of hiring trends, pipeline feasibility, and budget constraints. But I can talk about steps that I believe we should take, including all of the ones just mentioned, including paraprofessional to teacher pipelines, collaborating with colleges and universities, connecting to Melrose alumni. And we want to do this to ensure that we're improving representation at the teaching level. We have challenges. Budget limitations will impact some of the implementation here. Hiring educators of color is a statewide issue, and these are impacting our hiring goals. But it shouldn't impede our efforts to create a culture where students of color feel supported, feel heard, and feel inspired by the teachers that they have. I think accountability is more than just numbers, and we want to look at this holistically. If we're not meeting goals of hiring more teachers of color, We can consider if we're meeting our other goals. Are we hiring staff with strong DEI experience and cultural competency? Are we reducing discipline disparities for Black and Brown students? Are families of color reporting greater senses of a greater sense of belonging or trust? Are we offering ongoing training and coaching for our staff? Are we providing more opportunities for students to engage in racial studies? If we're not seeing progress in these areas and hiring more diverse staff, then we need to reevaluate our strategies and engage the community in identifying barriers. If we are seeing that other districts are able to hire more staff of color and we are not, then we need to discuss why Melrose is not meeting these similar goals. While we do face these challenges of hiring Black and Brown educators, we also, as stated in the Melrose Racial Climate Assessment Report, constituents can continue to do multicultural work despite the lack of diversity. And so we must remain committed to this so that we can make progress and encourage this progress while we are working to hire more representative staff.
Thank you again for answering those questions. And then we're going to go into question 5 now. School discipline. The order will be Sherry, Melissa, and then Jen. In the Melrose public school system, Black students are suspended at higher rates than white students. Melrose has one of the highest rates of racial disparity in school discipline compared with 12 neighboring communities. How do you plan to eliminate racial inequities in school discipline? And Sherry, we'll start with you.
Okay. Thanks, Ayana. This is such an important question. Thank you for asking it. And this comes back to one of my core values that I named before, support every student and ensure every student feels welcome, valued, and safe. What the data tell us, which is what you're lifting up right now with the question, is that we have a stark disparity in supports and a disparity that makes it harder to feel welcome, harder to feel valued, and harder to feel safe. The data raised troubling questions about school culture, about mindsets, about bias, and about the ways that we interact with one another. But I also know that the data alone can't answer these questions. So I would want to help stakeholders come together in order to understand how and why are we treating Black students differently. I would want to hear from the students, their families, educators, peers, to get underneath real experiences. How do we get underneath those experiences in order to rebuild trust and then invest in and build the programs that meet the needs of each individual student and meet the needs of groups of students, including our Black students? There are communities who have tackled this problem and made headway. There are different ways to proceed, like restorative justice practices. And any change starts with learning new ways of interacting, investing in Tier 1 and Tier 2 academic and social emotional supports, and building on areas of success within our schools and our district. So it is not all hopeless. We have a means to a path forward. This racial disparity is a challenge we must confront. And as a community, we are up to the task. We can change the story for students and work together to set up every student for success in school and life. Thank you again for having me and for shining a light on these important issues.
Thank you so much. And then we'll start the recording from Melissa.
First, we must evaluate and revise our discipline process policies as needed to ensure that they're not disproportionately impacting students of color. Melrose has made some strides in promoting social emotional learning, SEL, and that helps students build empathy, self-awareness, and better relationships. These are skills that can reduce conflict and improve classroom culture, which can be preventative for the need to implement discipline. Our student handbook also requires that we use restorative justice practices. These are used to these are designed to reduce suspensions and similar disciplinary measures. These practices can foster meaningful dialogue and accountability. We need to ensure that these practices are being actively implemented and supported across all the schools in Melrose. This needs to be a district-wide goal. Well, when the budget allows, we can also invest in de-escalation training for staff so that educators have the tools to respond to behavioral issues in ways that are fair to all students. Also, based on the budget, are positions we are hiring for, expanding access to school-based counselors and or social workers who can provide regular and consistent check-ins and support for our students with repeated infractions. And if we provide opportunities for students and educators to succeed, we should ultimately be able to see a change in our racial disparity and discipline. And that's tracked on a yearly basis. And so we can continue to review that year after year to make sure we're meeting these goals.
And Jen.
Thank you so much for having this forum. First of all, it's such an important topic to work towards. So I think that Melrose has to do better. One thing that I am very pleased with is the leadership that we have in each building right now, and that we've had some stability in elementary principals. I feel like one of the things that we need to keep doing, and we do a lot of this over the course of every year in school committee meetings, but we don't do it so much with discipline. But we look at a lot of data, and I think we have to look at this data and very carefully without revealing any one person's identity, because we don't want to talk about students specifically, right? So I think we have to be making sure that we have enough resources to offer the things that we outline in our handbooks, like restorative practices. I think we have to have paraprofessionals hired up in the middle school and in the elementary schools. If we are short-staffed and if students are struggling, then what principals often have to do is turn to discipline instead of to behavior management tools and behavior plans. So I think we've been short-staffed since the pandemic. There's a staff shortage of educators since the pandemic. Because Melrose pays poorly, it's hard to hire up for paraprofessionals. And so I think it really depends on where the problem is. If the problem's at the elementary school, you kind of address that through having more support staff and be doing a lot more behavioral interventions. If it's in the middle school, one of the things that we did this year that's, I think, going to help is tighten up the cell phone policy, both at the high school and the middle school. So I think kids can get into trouble when they don't have enough structure and then there's ways out of the classroom and into the bathrooms, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if that's part of the issue here, because we can't dig into the data to find out exactly what the behavior is, because then we'd be unveiling the student. So it's a little tricky to really fully understand the data, but I'm not doubting the data. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's harder to figure out and pinpoint the solution if you don't really look at it. And as a school committee member, we're not allowed to do that, dig it into that level. So I do think we have to hold leaders to high standards around racial disparities, whether it's in academics or whether it's in behavior and discipline. So, but once again, we have to have enough stability and enough resources to do the hardest part of the work in schools, building excellent culture, making sure no one's on the margins, bringing everyone in. So I hope that's what we're going to be able to do after November when we fully fund our schools, because that's going to help every single student in our schools. So I really appreciate both organizations putting this together. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to work on these issues with you.
Thank you so much. And that was our final question for the night. I want to say thank you to everyone for attending. Honestly, listening to everybody, you all are so passionate about your community, And it's inspiring on my end. And this is why I continue to want to be a part of what Melrose is doing, because it feels like the change wants to happen. Like everyone feels like they want to be change agents for the young people. And that's very encouraging as someone that attended a Metco school, and things were different back then. So thank you for coming. Thank you to everyone that took time out of their evening to be here. It matters. Please don't forget to vote on November 4th. And again, just